Summertime here in Ontario is very short, so you have to make the best of it, and one of the greatest ways to do that is by going up to the cottage. Now, I did some digging and found a few cute little cottages for around $100,000. And do you know what else costs $100,000? My test vehicle this week, the all-new 2018 Lincoln Navigator Reserve. So, is this SUV really worth the price of a cottage? Let's try and figure it out. So it's true, for the same money you'd pay for this Navigator, which is, as it sits, $103,000 Canadian, you could have your own cottage. But the first thing I have to tell you is that these seats in the Navigator are probably more comfortable than anything you'll have at your cabin. Now, Lincoln calls these the perfect position seats, and here on our Reserve model, they're a $1,000 option, but they're entirely worth it. And perfect position, that's not really hyperbole. There are so many different adjustments here. You can fit this seat perfectly with your body, and I think this is probably the most comfortable seat on the market right now. Let me show you all the different ways you can move this thing. So here's all the movements that make this seat so comfortable. First of all, the headrests can go in or out, up or down. And then just this top portion of the back is individually adjustable, so it can fold in or come out. Then of course, the whole seat back can either fold up or back. And then when it comes to the bottom, now of course the whole seat moves forward and backwards. You can move the front up and down individually of the back. And then maybe the nicest feature are individual bolsters for each one of your legs. So there's the left side out and the left side in, and then the right side can come in. So you can adjust individually to suit your body. Now when it comes to styling, most of those cottages are going for the quaint look, but there's nothing quaint about this Navigator. This thing is massive and beefy looking thanks to the lines that are pressed into the bodywork. And then what really ties it together and sets it off is that chrome mesh grille up front. This thing just looks luxurious and modern. And that's a big deal when you consider that the last generation Navigator never really had a cohesive design. To me, it always looked a bit awkward. This thing looks really well tied together all around, and once again, it absolutely screams luxury. Now, the heart of this Navigator is a 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6. It's actually the high-output version, the same as you'll find in the Ford Raptor. Here it makes 450 horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque sent through a 10-speed automatic transmission. Now, the Navigator doesn't feel quite as quick as the Raptor, but let me tell you, a vehicle like this that weighs 5,855 pounds, it has no business being this fast. When you plant your foot, it absolutely takes off. And just like in that truck, so far, I've had no issues with the 10-speed. It doesn't hunt for gears. It generally knows exactly where it wants to be. And my favorite thing about it is that when you're cruising in 10th, nail the throttle, it drops into 5th and takes off, or whatever the lower gear is. You know, it knows exactly where it wants to go, and it doesn't have to bump down all those gears. It just jumps to the gear, gives you the power, and you're gone. So Lincoln gives you choices on how to get the power to the ground. There's actually a couple different drive modes here. Now you can put it in Excite, which is for spirited driving. Then you have Conserve to save fuel, Normal 4x4 Auto, Slippery mode, Deep conditions, and then finally Slow climb. Now there's a few interesting things about those drive modes. First of all, the suspension here is adaptive, so it will change based on the mode. So put it in Excite and this thing stiffens up. It's still definitely no sports car and it's a heavy beast, but if you want to go a little faster and get a stiffer ride, you can. More importantly, put it in Comfort mode, and that's when this Navigator really shines. The suspension is really good at eating up road imperfections, and this big heavy SUV just floats down on the road, and that really adds to the luxury feeling. And the other interesting thing is that slow crawl mode. Now the Navigator does have a proper 2-speed transfer case, but you actually can't really get to it. You can't put this thing in low whenever you want. You have to put it into that slow crawl, and then it will shift down into your lower gear once you put this truck in neutral. The suspension is not the only adaptive thing about this Lincoln either. The Navigator adopted the adaptive steering ratio from the F-150, which means that at highway speeds, the ratio becomes a little looser, so the wheel's not quite as touchy, makes it really easy just to, track straight. And then at parking lot speeds, you have to turn the wheel less, which means that you don't have to work as hard to take tight corners. And with a vehicle this big, the ratio is actually noticeable, especially at those parking lot speeds. When you get in those tight, maneuverable kind of situations, you notice that, hey, all of a sudden this thing really likes to turn. Now, when it comes to technology, this Lincoln is chock full of it. Definitely more tech than you're gonna get at a cottage. And what's more, you might have already thought to yourself, well, at nighttime at the cottage, I get this beautiful view of the stars. Let me tell you, this Navigator offers that too. And that's not the only thing the Navigator does when you walk up to it to start it up. Take a look at this. So here's how the Navigator greets you when you unlock it at night. And then when you lock it, they roll back in. Good night. It's those kind of thoughtful luxury appointments, having the lights automatically come on as you walk up to it, that really set luxury vehicles apart. And the last time I showed up to my cottage at night, we all had flashlights and we had to find our way in and turn the lights on. So there's nothing at the cottage that's going to welcome you like this Navigator does. Another very useful piece of tech in here is the adaptive cruise control. Now, while cruising at highway speeds, it works fine, but when it really stands out is with the stop and go mode. So this Navigator will essentially drive for you in traffic. You still have to steer, but it will take care of the gas and the brake. And I've used a few other systems like this, and some of them can be kind of jerky. The car doesn't know what it wants to do, suddenly speeds up, slows down harsh. This Navigator is very smooth in traffic all on its own, and it's not far off from how I would drive, so I've really liked using it when I'm sitting in stop and go. Now, other technology here includes automatic high beams, active park assist, which will actually park this beast for you, and one of my other personal favorites, the head-up display, and that's because it is just a really crisp image. It's one of the nicest looking head-up displays that I've seen. Oh yeah, and how can I forget about the 20-speaker Revel Ultima audio system in this thing? Even cranked to the max, this thing sounds nice and clean, and I can guarantee you it sounds better than your buddy at the campfire with the acoustic guitar. Now, the materials in this Lincoln also scream luxury, and they're much better than anything you're gonna get out of the cottage. Now, you have this beautiful real wood trim with chrome surrounding it, piano black down here in the center. This thing sitting inside it absolutely feels like it's worth $100,000. Now, the rear seat entertainment package makes back there a really nice place to be. Not only do you get large screens on the back of the headrest to watch movies or whatever, you also get a little LCD screen in between you to control all the multimedia. You can control the HVAC settings, and you even have a switch to roll back the sunshade on the sunroof. Now, besides all the great tech features back here in the rear seat, I also get 41.1 inches of legroom, which is a ton. Now, this seat here is set up for me to be driving, so it's quite far back, and I still have lots of space. Although I will say, I stand at 6'2", and I'm basically on the roof, so headroom does leave something to be desired. Now, this seat also reclines nicely though, so if you wanted to get some more headroom and maybe take a nap, you can easily do that. So, I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so now let me show you guys the third row, and Lincoln says it also has over 40 inches of legroom, which for a third row is nuts. Now, these seats fold and then roll forward, leaving me with a ton of space to get in and out of this thing. I mean, even for me, a big dude, that's no problem.
Then this seat pulls back, and bingo, I'm in. Now headroom back here is not a problem, and that's because this seat also reclines. It's a power recliner controlled by a switch over here on the wall, and you know what, for a third row, this is fine. I could actually do probably a whole road trip back here and not go crazy. Another nice thing, there are USB ports in both sides here and cup holders in both sides, so you know, the third row passengers don't have to feel like third class citizens. And then when it's time to get out, reverse the process, that seat pushes forward, and it's simple, you're out. Another neat storage option on this Lincoln is back here. So first of all, you remove the carpet from the trunk, and then you have this panel. Now it flips up in two different ways, but if you flip it backwards like that, then stand it up, then over here in the corners there's these little clips that pop out, one on each side, and then it comes down and sits right in there like that, and essentially creates a second storage shelf for you. So if you have some stuff that's not too heavy, groceries or something, you're gonna basically double your space behind the rear passenger seat. It's pretty smart. So here comes the good, the bad, and the weird. And for the good, I'm going with this push button transmission. You know what? This thing takes a little bit of getting used to, but it frees up so much space out of the interior and allowed Lincoln to have this really clean design in here, and it works great. That's good. Okay, now for the bad, I'm actually gonna go with something on the build sheet. See the tiered cargo management system? 500 bucks? For a vehicle that costs over $90,000 standard, shouldn't that thing be included? And now for the weird. Maybe some of you guys love this feature, but I don't totally understand why this Navigator has a glass that flips up individually. I mean, are people really hauling lumber and stuff with their $100,000 SUV? I don't really think so. So to me, this feature is just kind of weird. Now don't be fooled by how luxurious it is, because this Navigator can work pretty hard as well. With the towing package in four-wheel drive, this Navigator can tow 8,300 pounds. And what I think is more impressive is that what comes along with the tow package isn't just a hitch. You also get an integrated trailer brake controller, and you get Ford's Pro Trailer Backup Assist system. So, you know, Ford gives you all of their trailering goodies just in case you want to pull something big. And of course you have tow haul mode, but unlike the F-150 where it's accessible by a button, here in the Lincoln, you have to actually go into the screen up here and find tow haul to turn it on. So of course this Navigator does compete with those German SUVs from Mercedes-Benz and BMW, but its most direct competition is definitely the Cadillac Escalade. And considering how old the Escalade is now, it's not really much competition at all. This Navigator definitely wins that battle. Okay, so now let's talk fuel economy and how much gas this thing sucks up. So north of the border in Canada, the Navigator is rated at 14.9 liters per 100 kilometers in the city, 11.3 liters on the highway for a combined 13.3 liters per 100. Now that is with four-wheel drive, and up here north of the border, you can actually only get four-wheel drive Navigators. You cannot get a two-wheel drive. That is only sold in the States. Now in the US, also with four-wheel drive, the Navigator is rated at 16 miles per gallon in the city, 21 miles per gallon on the highway for a combined 18 miles per gallon. So over the course of my day today, I've done 127 kilometers, and I'm currently averaging 15.3 liters per 100. Now, that does not quite live up to the combined rating, but honestly, in a vehicle this big, I'm not that surprised at that. And it's also worth saying that if you're spending $103,000 on an SUV, you probably don't care how much fuel it burns. So like I mentioned, every Navigator sold in Canada has four-wheel drive, and that's because we don't get the basic Premier trim which sells in the States. So here in Canada, we start with the Select trim, and that's going to cost just over $88,000 to start. Whereas in the States, you guys start with the Premier trim, and that will sell for $72,000. And with that trim, you can actually get a two-wheel drive model.
Now, if you were to get a reserve and then add on all the options, just like I have it here, in the States, this Navigator sells for $92,300. So is it really worth that $103,000? Would I be better served just buying the cottage and getting away from people? Well, I have to say, honestly, after driving this thing all day, I can see the value in it. It's comfortable and luxurious. The design in here is modern, and I don't think it's gonna look old anytime soon. So the short answer is yes, I really do believe that your 100 grand is pretty well spent on this Navigator.
This 2018 Lincoln Navigator is honestly one of the nicest luxury SUVs I've driven in a long time. Now, would I take it over a cottage? Well, that's still up for debate, but I did figure out the best strategy of all. Buy the Navigator and then visit your friends' cottages in absolute luxury. Hell, I'd even sleep in this thing. It would definitely beat a tent. So that's it for now, guys. As always, come back here to TFL Truck for the latest news, views, and real-world reviews. See ya!